Everyone knows there are 3 things you can't mess with in the film world: Keanu Reeves' dog, Jason Statham's delivery, and Liam Neeson's daughter. But what you don't know is that there's someone else whose friend you can't touch. That would be Denzel Washington's little girl. Old Dan used to be a top special forces soldier, specialized in assassination and sabotage missions. Countless lives were taken by his hands. This led to him frequently seeing images of the dead after retiring, leaving him trapped in guilt and unable to escape. He can only numb himself with alcohol, his only friend. He doesn't want to sink into this forever. With the persuasion of his friend, Old Dan came to Mexico, becoming the private bodyguard of a wealthy family. His main job is taking care of the little girl, Pitta. Pitta has a cheerful personality. From their first meeting, Pitta saw Old Dan as a friend. Every day on the way to school, Pitta would enthusiastically chat with him. However, years of a life filled with killing made Old Dan difficult to approach. This inevitably left Pitta feeling a bit disappointed. On this day, Pitta's parents went on a business trip together. This gave the two of them a chance to be alone. While doing her homework, Pitta once again tried to communicate with Old Dan.
But the Emperor of China had 1,000 of them.
Okay, like nowadays in the West, they have one husband for one wife, but in the olden time cultures, they had, different. Why, you feel sorry for the husband?
Yeah, can you imagine my mom multiplied by 1,000?
Pitta's innocence and cuteness healed Old Dan's broken heart. He started to approach Pitta on his own. Upon learning that Pitta wanted to participate in a swimming competition, he specifically created a training plan for Pitta. On the day of the competition, with the sound of a gunshot, Pitta skillfully jumped into the swimming pool. Dan cheered and supported her all the way, helping Pitta secure the first place. Pitta was like a little angel. It gradually made Dan forget his past troubles. To show gratitude to Dan, Pitta used her own pocket money to buy a gift for Dan. It was a pendant that served as a guide for the lost. Dan smiled so happily for the first time. However, unexpected events occurred. On that day, after Pitta finished practicing the piano, as soon as he walked out of the door, 2 police cars blocked the road, one in front and one behind. A white car slowly approached. Dan immediately sensed the danger. Dan fired a warning shot to alert Pitta. He shouted for Pitta to escape quickly, but unexpectedly, the police and the kidnappers colluded. Dan was caught in a crossfire. Although he was incredibly brave, he managed to kill 4 of them in a row. But in the end, he was outnumbered. Pitta saw Dan getting shot. She rushed back to Dan's side regardless of everything. Unfortunately, she was captured by the remaining kidnappers. Afterward, the severely injured Dan was taken to the hospital. He barely survived. On the other side, under the command of the chubby man, the police anti-kidnapping team started to deploy. The kidnappers quickly made a phone call. They demanded a ransom of $10 million to ensure the safety of their daughter. Pitta's father had no choice but to comply. $10 million were packed into 2 bags. They put the bags into the car trunk as instructed. But before he could get far, the police took matters into their own hands and ambushed the kidnappers who came to collect the money. The next day, they received the devastating news about Pitta over the phone. He had been brutally murdered by the kidnappers. When Dan regained consciousness, his friends informed him of Pitta's death. Dan was instantly filled with anger. He swore to kill everyone involved in the kidnapping. To avenge Pitta and seek justice, the woman went mad and approached the police. She gave each of them a resounding slap. Just a moment ago, due to the police's unauthorized actions, his 10-year-old daughter was taken hostage by the kidnappers. On the other side, ignoring his friend's advice, Dan, who had been shot multiple times, arrived at the scene where Pitta had been kidnapped. He tried to find any trace of the kidnappers. Just when he was at a loss, a female journalist approached from a distance. She had been secretly investigating the kidnapping case. Although she had made some discoveries, she had been struggling to delve deeper. She invited Dan to collaborate with her. They saw this as an opportunity to eliminate these scum once and for all. As a condition for their collaboration, she would leverage her connections. She would provide Dan with all the necessary clues. In order to avenge Pitta, Dan didn't hesitate for long. Accepted the journalist's business card. Soon, with the help of a friend, Lao Dan purchased a large quantity of firearms and ammunition from an arms dealer. Then remembered the license plate number of the kidnappers. Asked the journalist to look up information about the vehicle. Turns out the journalist and the head of the intelligence agency are from the same hometown. Quickly obtained a clue. Lao Dan found the vehicle used in the crime based on the address from the clue. Successfully apprehended one of the kidnappers. He bound the kidnapper's hands with tape, showing 10 fingers to interrogate the mastermind behind the kidnapping. Unexpectedly, the kidnapper claimed to be a police officer. Boldly threatened Lao Dan with a knife, demanding he cut off his own finger. Used a lighter to help stop the bleeding. Then cut off the second finger, the third finger. The kidnapper couldn't bear the torture any longer. Confessed the accomplice named Butcher. But Lao Dan didn't let him go. Instead, he pushed the car and the person off a cliff. That night, Lao Dan went to the bar based on the clue. He kidnapped a guard, suddenly attacked when the person opened the door, expertly controlled the situation. He wasted no time, shot and killed Butcher directly. The other enemy was terrified. Could only confess everything. The entire kidnapping process. The boss never shows up, only deposits the commission into a bank account after the job is done. Lao Dan was surprised to learn that the fat guy was from the police station, specially sent someone to ambush the kidnappers and take the ransom. This resulted in Peter being torn apart. Old Dan's anger flares up instantly. He shoots and kills the kidnapper. He tears open the gas pipeline. He blows up this den of evil. Old Dan then arranges to meet with a reporter. He asks him to find out the information about the person who made the payment. He also asks him to inquire about the situation of the fat guy. The fat guy has a lot of power at the police station. He has a convoy escort every time he goes out, but this doesn't pose a challenge for Old Dan at all. Based on decades of assassination experience, he quickly selects the location to strike. He starts to lie in wait for the prey. Even if you haven't seen this movie, you should have heard this classic line.
Forgiveness is between them and God. It's my job to arrange the meeting.
Old Dan raises the rocket launcher. He aims at the oncoming convoy. The fat guy is trapped in the car and can't move. Old Dan takes out the bodyguard who gets out of the car. After kidnapping the fat guy, he drives away. When the fat guy wakes up, he finds himself tied to the hood. Old Dan takes out a cylinder plug, a pencil-sized detonator, a simple timer and a bag of high-explosive plastic explosives. He tells the fat guy that the bomb is inside him right now. As he says that, he starts a 5-minute countdown. The fat guy, scared, keeps begging for mercy. He confesses to all his crimes. It turns out that the fat guy took advantage of his position to repeatedly ambush the kidnappers. He stole the ransom. However, Peter's ransom was not 10 million at all. It was 2.5 million. The remaining 7.5 million is all worthless paper. Nowadays, it's already been tampered with before the payment is made. And the only one who had contact with the ransom in the end was the lawyer of the tycoon. When Fatty finished saying all this, Old Dan turned around and left directly, leaving himself there to wait for death. Old Dan rushed to the lawyer's mansion. He found that the lawyer had already been silenced by someone. He went to the lawyer's office. He found an overseas transfer record. The transfer amount happened to be 7.5 million, and the account holder happened to be Peter's father. In an instant, Old Dan understood everything. He rushed to the tycoon's house. He angrily questioned the tycoon. The tycoon's psychological defense collapsed in an instant. It turns out his business was on the verge of bankruptcy, so he colluded with the kidnappers to stage the kidnapping of his own daughter. The purpose was to deceive 10 million in insurance money. 250,000 was given to the kidnappers. He never expected that Fatty would snatch it away halfway, ultimately leading to the tragic death of his daughter. The wife who discovered the truth was heartbroken, never wanting to see the man in front of her again. Old Dan left behind a handgun, handing a bullet to the tycoon. The tycoon, with a heart as cold as ashes, ultimately chose to end his own life with the bullet. On the other side, with the help of the chief, the journalist found the address of the leader of the kidnappers through a bank card. After Old Dan obtained the address, he broke into the leader's residence with a gun. He took control of his family members, but he was accidentally ambushed by the leader's younger brother. However, the net of heaven is wide-meshed but lets nothing through. The runaway younger brother had a car accident. He was captured and brought back by Lao Dan. Lao Dan used his own life to threaten the wife of the boss and contact the boss. At this time, Lao Dan was seriously injured. He could only rely on painkillers to support his body. After the call was connected, the boss learned that his younger brother was captured, but he remained calm. It turns out that he had already prepared an escape route. He fabricated false news that Peter was killed, but Peter was still alive. He wanted to exchange Peter's life for the lives of his younger brother and Lao Dan. Lao Dan was eager to save lives. He agreed. They immediately went to the designated location to exchange the younger brother. On the way, he informed Peter's mother. After they met up, Peter's mother was responsible for watching over the hostage. Lao Dan, with his battered body, slowly walked to the bridge, and when he saw Peter, he finally breathed a sigh of relief. Peter shouted Lao Dan's name loudly. He excitedly ran towards Lao Dan. The two of them hugged tightly. But the happy reunion could only be short-lived. With tears in his eyes, Lao Dan bid farewell to Peter. He let Peter return to his mother's side. Lao Dan slowly got up and walked towards the kidnappers. Before being taken away by the kidnappers, he couldn't bear to take one last look at Peter. Due to his severe injuries, Lao Dan slowly closed his eyes in the car. At the lowest point in his life, he encountered an angel who saved him. Now he sacrificed his own life to protect the safety of the angel. He had no regrets in this life. A few days later, the investigation bureau found the ringleader. They shot him on the spot, and that's the end of the movie.